TIFU by organizing a pet meet and greet for my neighbor's capybara. Let me set the scene. I live in Willow Creek Estates, a middle-class suburban maze of beige houses and impeccably manicured lawns, where the most radical act is choosing begonias over petunias. I'm David, 34, a freelance graphic designer. My wife, Jenny, is a kindergarten teacher. Our son, Leo, is 7, a ball of endless curiosity with a heart too big for his small frame. Our life was a comfortable, predictable loop of work, school, soccer practice, and weekend trips to Home Depot. We were blissfully, ignorantly, boring. Then, Mr. Peterson moved into the 2-story colonial next door. He arrived in a moving truck containing mostly books and a single, large, carefully packed crate that took 3 movers to maneuver. He was in his late 60s, tall and thin with a scholarly stoop, silver hair always slightly ruffled. His eyes, behind wire-rimmed glasses, held a profound, quiet sadness that even a child could sense. He introduced himself formally, shook my hand with a firm, dry grip, and retreated behind his new door. The first sign of weirdness, as later dubbed by the neighborhood's self-appointed sentinel, was the deliveries. Not furniture or TVs, but biweekly shipments of orchard grass hay, specialized aquatic pellets, and giant bags of something called capybara crunch. The second sign was the fence. Within a week, a 6-foot-tall, solid wooden privacy fence went up around his entire backyard, blotting out the view from Gary Molson's prized kitchen window. Gary, our WA president, took this as a personal affront. Gary Molson. Imagine a human embodiment of a perfectly edged lawn. Rigid, green with envy for any deviation, and constantly needing to be trimmed of perceived excess. He wore polo shirts with the collar popped, even to take out the trash, and his smile never reached his eyes. He ruled the Willow Creek Estates Facebook group with an iron fist, deleting posts about garage sales that ran a minute past 4 p.m. and issuing warnings about unapproved mailbox colors. The rumor mill, stoked by Gary, began to churn. Probably a hoarder, Gary announced at the annual block party barbecue, sipping a light beer. All those books, and the smell from those deliveries? Animal feed. He's probably running some back alley petting zoo. Against CCRs, Article 12, subsection C. No keeping of livestock or non-domesticated animals. I've got my eye on him. I shrugged it off. Gary had his eye on everyone. My real introduction to Mr. Peterson's world came via a wayward soccer ball. Leo, in a moment of spectacular enthusiasm, launched it clean over the new fence. With a sigh, I shepherded him next door, ready to offer apologies. Mr. Peterson opened the door, looking mildly startled, as if interrupted from deep thought. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Peterson," I began. "Leo's ball? It's quite all right," he said softly, his voice a low rumble. He made no move to let us in, turning instead to fetch it. But Leo, peering past him into the dim hallway, let out a gasp that sucked all the air from the porch. "Dad, look, it's a giant beaver." I looked, and blinked. In the shadowy hallway, regarding us with placid, intelligent brown eyes, was an animal the size of a large dog, but built like a barrel on stubby legs. It had coarse, brownish fur, a blunt nose and small, rounded ears. It chattered softly, a sound like wooden blocks knocking together. Mr. Peterson froze, then his shoulders slumped in a mix of resignation and something else, a flicker of pride. He sighed. "Not a beaver, young man. Though an understandable mistake. This is Rosa. She's a capybara." What?" I managed. "The world's largest rodent. Native to South America. Semi-aquatic, highly social." He spoke as if giving a lecture, but his hand drifted down to scratch behind Rosa's ear. She leaned into the touch, her eyes closing in contentment. That was the crack in the dam. Leo was instantly, irrevocably enchanted. For the next 10 minutes, Mr. Peterson, thawing under Leo's barrage of questions, gave us a crash course. Rosa was 8 years old. He'd gotten her as a juvenile from a bankrupt exotic animal sanctuary where he'd volunteered after his wife passed. She was house-trained, used a litter box, loved sweet potatoes and long soaks in a modified kiddie pool he kept in a sunroom. She was, for all intents and purposes, his emotional support animal, his companion in a too-quiet house. We left with our soccer ball and an open invitation to visit Rosa again. Leo talked of nothing else for days. Against Jenny's initial hesitation, a giant rodent, David? Really? We started visiting. Saturday afternoons became Rosa time. We'd bring carrots. Leo would read to her. She seemed to like the rhythm of his voice. Mr. Peterson, whose first name was Arthur, though Leo still called him Mr. Peterson, would make us tea and slowly open up. He told us about his wife, Eleanor, about teaching Shakespeare to bored undergraduates, about the hollow silence after she was gone, and how Rosa's calm, grounded presence had given him a reason to get up each morning. I liked him. He was kind, erudite, and deeply lonely. Our friendship was a slow, gentle burn. I'd help him with heavy lifting. He'd give Leo obscure, fascinating books. Rosa became part of our family's landscape. She was astonishingly gentle, letting Leo brush her fur, making her soft, contented click-click noises. Jenny was won over completely when Rosa, sensing she was stressed after a parent-teacher conference, simply rested her heavy head in Jenny's lap and sighed. But this idol had a shadow, Gary Molson. The fence had driven him mad with curiosity. He'd taken to patrolling the sidewalk in front of Mr. Peterson's house, walking his yappy terrier, Brutus, at all hours, trying to catch a glimpse. He'd cornered me at the mailbox. Heard you're cozy with the weirdo, David. See anything unauthorized over there? Just a nice old man and his pet, Gary, I'd reply, my tone neutral. Pets are dogs, cats, approved fish. Not whatever that is. I'm compiling a file. The smell, the noise, the fence. It's a blight on property values. His jaw was set. The war was declared, though only one side was fighting. The first shot across the bow was an official WA notice, slipped into Mr. Peterson's mailbox. It cited, potential violation of livestock regulations, and unsubstantiated complaints regarding olfactory nuisance, demanding an inspection of premises. Arthur showed it to me, his hands trembling. They can't take her, David. They can't. She's all I have. I was furious. This was bullying, pure and simple. I attended the next WA meeting with him. Gary, presiding from a folding table at the community clubhouse, was in his element. He read the complaint with solemn gravitas. A few other busybodies nodded along. I stood up, my voice shaking with the anger I didn't know I possessed. This is harassment. Mr. Peterson is a valued neighbor. Rosa is a domesticated, beloved pet. She causes no disturbance. What's the real issue here? That her fence blocks your view? Gary's smile was thin. The issue, David, is rules. They exist for a reason. For the harmony of the community. We cannot have exotic fauna roaming. She doesn't roam. She's in his house or his fully fenced yard. The meeting devolved into bickering. No vote was taken, but the lines were drawn. The Willow Creek Estates Facebook group became a battlefield. Gary's post, dripping with faux concern, concerned about property values and safety, gathered a handful of likes from his usual sycophants. My wife, Jenny, never one for public conflict, wrote a stunningly eloquent rebuttal about compassion and minding one's own business, which rallied a silent majority of neighbors who were just fine with Arthur and Rosa. The neighborhood was now a tinderbox of quiet resentment and whispered alliances. That's when I had the idea. The catastrophically stupid idea. We need to win the PR war, I told Arthur over tea in his sunroom, Rosa drowsing at our feet. Gary's weapon is fear of the unknown. So we show them. We demystify her. We host a Meet Rosa event. In your backyard. Invite the neighbors. Show them how gentle, how clean, how utterly harmless she is. Once they see her, they can't demonize her. Arthur looked terrified. David, I'm not a showman. What if she gets scared? What if someone provokes her? We'll control it, I said, the confidence of the truly naive coursing through me. Small group. By invitation only. We'll provide information, snacks. It'll be a neighborhood education event. We'll even invite Gary. Kill him with kindness. Jenny was skeptical. David, this feels like poking a bear. A very tidy, rule-obsessed bear. But I was convinced it was a masterstroke. Arthur, desperate and trusting me, reluctantly agreed. We planned it for a Saturday afternoon. I designed cute, friendly flyers, Meet Rosa, the world's friendliest capybara, and slipped them into the mailboxes of what I deemed neutral, or friendly, houses. I explicitly did not put one in Gary's box, a petty move I immediately regretted. Of course, he found out. He posted in the Facebook group, unsanctioned gathering involving unapproved animal this Saturday. WA is monitoring. All residents are reminded of liability waivers and noise ordinances. The stage was set for disaster. Saturday arrived, sunny and deceptively peaceful. Arthur was a nervous wreck. He'd cleaned the backyard until it sparkled, set up a small table with pamphlets about capybaras he'd printed from a scientific website, and laid out a platter of vegetables for Rosa. Jenny had made lemonade and cookies. Leo was buzzing with excitement, appointed official Rosa ambassador. About 15 neighbors trickled in, mostly the curious, the kind-hearted, and the morbidly fascinated. The Bradleys from down the street, the elderly Ms. Henderson, a few young couples. The atmosphere was tense but polite. Rosa, sensing Arthur's anxiety, stayed close to him, but was her usual placid self, accepting carrot sticks with delicate grace. People were smiling. They were taking pictures. It was working. Then Gary arrived. He didn't come alone. He brought Brutus, the terrier, on a leash, and his wife, Carol, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. He also brought the Thompsons' 5-year-old twins, hyperactive boys he'd apparently volunteered to watch. He marched in like an inspector general. "Well, let's see this menace to the community," he announced, his voice carrying. The mood chilled. Arthur flinched. Rosa looked up, her nose twitching. For a few minutes, it was just awkward. Gary pointedly examined the fence, made notes on a small pad. The twins ran circles around the yard, shrieking. Brutus yapped incessantly. Then, one of the twins, a boy named Kyle, produced a party favor. One of those cardboard tubes that unfurl with a loud pop when you blow into it. No one knows where he got it. Before anyone could react, he ran right up to where Rosa was resting beside Arthur, put the tube to his lips, and blew. Bang, pop, screech. The sound was explosive, metallic, and utterly alien in the quiet yard. Rosa, the creature of serene wetlands, erupted in pure, blind panic. 100 pounds of muscle and instinct launched sideways. She didn't snarl or bite. She fled. In her terror, she bolted straight into the snack table. The table collapsed with a crash of glass and splashing lemonade. Gary, who had been standing right behind it, lecturing Ms. Bradley about fence height regulations, didn't have a chance. The table leg caught his ankle. He went down hard, with a sickening, wet crack and a scream that was anything but dignified. He crumpled into the wreckage of cookies and broken glass, clutching his leg, his face white. Chaos. People screamed. The twins started wailing. Brutus was having a barking fit. Jenny rushed to call 911. I stood frozen, my brain refusing to process the tableau of ruin. And Rosa? Rosa was gone. In the confusion, the gate to the backyard, which someone had left ajar while bringing in more chairs, swung open. A blur of brown fur shot through it, across the driveway, and into the open front door of the only house on the street with its door gaping wide open. Gary Molson's house. Carol had run inside to get a first aid kit, leaving the door open. "No!" Arthur and I shouted in unison. We took off, leaving Gary writhing on the ground, neighbors fluttering around him like confused moths. We reached Gary's front door just in time to hear a different kind of crash from inside. Not of panic, but of water. A lot of water. Rosa, terrified, disoriented, and seeking the one thing that brought her comfort and stress, water, had found it. She'd barreled through Gary's pristine living room, into the kitchen, and located a source of aquatic solace. The automatic, top-of-the-line, stainless steel water and ice dispenser on the front of his massive refrigerator. In her frantic pressing and rubbing against it, she had somehow engaged the lever and then, in her struggle, likely torn the water line. A geyser of cold water was arcing across the kitchen, soaking cherrywood cabinets, state-of-the-art appliances, and flowing in a rapid river into the sunken living room, where it began to pool on an enormous, ornate, cream-colored Persian rug. Rosa herself was standing in the middle of the living room, soaked, trembling, and chattering in distress, her hooves sinking into the now sodden, priceless wool. Arthur made a soft, broken sound beside me. It was the sound of a dream ending. The paramedics arrived for Gary. The police arrived for the destructive animal, and the breaking and entering report Gary filed from his gurney. The water mitigation company arrived for the flood, and my family stood on the sidewalk, watching our quiet suburban life unravel in a whirl of flashing lights, angry shouts, and the forlorn sight of a sedated Rosa being loaded into an animal control van. The following weeks were a descent into a special kind of suburban hell. Medical. Gary had a fractured fibula and a severe ankle sprain. His medical bills were substantial. His lawyer's first letter arrived before he was out of his walking cast. Material. The damage to his house was catastrophic. The water had seeped into the finished basement. The Persian rug was a total loss. He presented an invoice from an auction house valuing it at $18,000. The engineered hardwood flooring in the kitchen and living room was warped. Drywall damage. Mold mitigation. The initial estimate from his insurance adjuster was north of $50,000. Our homeowner's insurance was dragged in. The adjusters argued. Our premiums were set to skyrocket. Legal. The lawsuit landed with a thud on our doorstep. Gary Molson versus Arthur Peterson and David Mercer. He claimed negligence, emotional distress, loss of enjoyment of property, and the pièce de résistance, pain and suffering from having to witness his sanctuary destroyed by a wild animal. Arthur was served papers to appear in court to determine if Rosa would be declared a dangerous animal and seized for good. Social. The Facebook group became a war crimes tribunal. Gary's faction painted us as reckless hippies who had unleashed a beast upon the neighborhood. Our faction, smaller now, argued it was a tragic accident exacerbated by Gary's own hostility and his failure to control the child he was supervising. Friendships of 20 years fractured over comments about rodent lovers versus fascist busybodies. Jenny cried herself to sleep after a particularly nasty note was left on our car. Leo was bullied at the bus stop, called Rat Boy. Personal. The stress was atomic. Arthur aged 10 years in a month. The fight to get Rosa back from animal control, she was being held as evidence, was draining his savings and his spirit. Our friendship, the very thing I'd sought to protect, strained under the weight of mutual, unspoken blame. He'd look at me with haunted eyes, and I knew he was thinking, "You suggested the party." I'd look at the mountain of legal paperwork and think, "You didn't secure the gate." We were drowning in depositions, mediation sessions, and letters from lawyers. The wall levied massive fines against Arthur for the unauthorized event and the animal incident. They started foreclosure proceedings on his house for unpaid fines and dues, using a clause in the CCRs I never knew existed. He was going to lose everything: his companion, his home, his peace. I had done this. My stupid, arrogant, let's kill them with kindness idea had lit the fuse on a life. The court date for the dangerous animal hearing loomed. Arthur's lawyer was pragmatic but grim. Given the scale of the property damage and the injury, the judge is likely to side with classifying the capybara as a potential danger. We can argue for relocation to a sanctuary, but you likely won't get her back, Mr. Peterson. Arthur listened, nodded, and said nothing. The light in him was going out. Then, a crack appeared in Gary's perfect, furious armor. It came from the most mundane source, the water damage restoration crew. While assessing the basement, where water had dripped down through the ceiling, they had to investigate a locked storage room. Gary was oddly insistent they didn't need to enter. Protocol demanded it. He became agitated, threatening to sue them. Their supervisor, a no-nonsense guy named Ray, smelled a rat, figuratively. He called the city building inspector, citing possible code violations affecting their work. With a police escort for the warrant, Gary was screaming about property rights on his front lawn. His leg still in a boot, they opened the room. It wasn't a storage room. It was a sophisticated, climate-controlled, hydroponic marijuana grow operation. Dozens of plants under high-intensity lights, with a complex irrigation and ventilation system illegally tied into the main power grid, bypassing the meter. The theft of services alone was a felony. In a non-legalized state, the possession with intent to distribute charges were catastrophic. Gary Molson, the paragon of rules and order, the man who'd cited me for a lawn 0.25 inches too high, had been running a criminal enterprise from his basement. The olfactory nuisance he'd complained about? Likely a projection. The manic obsession with others' compliance? A classic tactic to deflect scrutiny. The police raid was the talk of the town. Gary and Carol were led away in handcuffs. His legal momentum against us evaporated overnight. His lawyer dropped him as a client. The civil suit was put on indefinite hold as he faced his own, far more serious, criminal charges. We won, technically. But there are no clean victories in neighbor wars. The WA, embroiled in its own scandal, quietly dropped the foreclosure proceedings and the fines against Arthur. The civil suit was settled for a pittance covered by insurance, as Gary's new, court-appointed lawyer advised him to take any deal to raise cash for his defense. But Rosa was gone. The protracted legal battle and the dangerous animal designation, though now from a discredited plaintiff, had taken its toll. The sanctuary that was willing to take her initially was now full. The only option was a specialized wildlife facility 3 states away. Arthur, broken financially and spiritually, made the heart-shattering decision to sign her over to them permanently. He couldn't afford the fight anymore, and he believed she deserved peace, not to be a perpetual legal battleground. He sold his house a month later, at a loss, to a young couple who knew nothing of the drama. The last time I saw him, he was loading the final box of books into his old sedan. He looked smaller, deflated. "I'm sorry, Arthur," I said, the words utterly inadequate. "For everything." He looked at me, not with anger, but with a profound, weary sadness. "You meant well, David. That's the terrible part. We all just meant well in our own ways." He shook my hand, got in his car, and drove away without looking back. The new neighbors are nice. They have a golden retriever. Gary's house was sold at auction to pay his legal fees. The neighborhood Facebook group is dead, mercifully. I still see it sometimes, in the quiet of the evening. The gentle giant chattering in the sunroom, the old man's shy smile, the unbroken trust. And I see it shatter into a million pieces, the scream, the crash, the geyser of water, the flashing lights. I tried to build a bridge with a neighbor. Instead, I unleashed an avalanche that crushed his world, exposed a hypocrite, tore our community apart, and left me standing in the rubble, holding nothing but guilt and the bitter knowledge that no good deed, no matter how carefully planned, ever goes unpunished in the suburbs.